All right, this video is going to be everything you need to get started using Sketchup. So when I first opened Sketchup, you can see that I have a ton of toolbars here. You may not have all of these docked, so I'm going to right click and go ahead and just turn all of these on. I also have a bunch of plugins here that don't ship with SketchUp. These are rendering plugins and an AI plugin. So don't worry about those, but go ahead and right click in this toolbar area and turn on all of the toolbars that you see. Also on the right, this is the default tray. I have all of these set up. These are all expandable tabs. We'll go over what each of these mean. We'll go over the basic tools and how to get started in SketchUp. So to start off, it's a 3D modeling software. It starts with lines and curves, and then you can take those curves and then create 3D geometry from them. So like any 3D software, lines are pretty easy to create. I just created 4 lines. And it's also important to write down the keyboard shortcuts for all of these tools as you're working, because as your workflow progresses, you're going to want to refer to those more quickly. So L is line. I can hit that on my keyboard and jump to that quickly. So this is a polyline, and I hit spacebar to go to the select tool or the arrow. You can also hit escape to get out of a command. So I just clicked on line, hit escape a few times, and that'll end that curve. And then if I want to go to arrow, I can hit spacebar and I'm back to that. And you'll notice it created this 3-dimensionally, not exactly what I wanted. So a couple things to notice. There's this triad in the center. This is the axis. X, Y, and Z is blue. And so as you're working, always be aware of which plane you're working on. By default, it's going to snap to the XY plane, but it's important to know, for example, if I just hit rectangle and I use the arrow tools, if I use the left arrow on my keyboard, I'm now snapping to this axis. If I hit the right arrow, it's going to snap to this axis, and then up is the default XY. So there's different axes or planes of working in SketchUp, and so it's important to know which axis you're working in, or which plane you're modeling in. So you noticed when I connected these curves together, I'm able to form a solid. Not this time, because it made this 3-dimensional. Let's try and just drawing this. So this is a planar surface, so it connected them and it created a surface here. This is now a 3D geometry that I can push, pull, and do other operations to, but this is giving me a surface that I can now work with. Some other things to notice. To zoom, I use the scroll wheel on my mouse. To pan, I hold shift and middle mouse click and drag. And to orbit, I hold down my middle mouse button. Okay, so those are the kind of main ways to navigate. There's also keyboard or commands on the left that you can use as well. All right, some of these are good to be able to create a scene and to be able to work within that scene, look around gives me the ability to stay where I am, but look in different directions. Walk gives me the ability to click and drag and move the camera around, keeping the height the same. We'll talk about section planes later on when we have some 3D geometry. And position camera allows us to set the camera location. So we've just created a surface. We want to create an extrusion of this, or using the push and pull. So the keyboard shortcut for this is P. So I can click. And so now I have a three-dimensional geometry. And this is the way SketchUp and most 3D software works. It starts with curves. You can turn those curves into 3D geometry. And I say curves because that's inclusive of lines. Lines are within the category of curves when it comes to geometry. So we'll talk about how to deal with these 3D geometries in a second, but first I wanted to go over the different curves. So I'm going to select this, delete it, delete these. So you saw early on that I used the rectangle tool. Shortcut is R for this. Pretty self-explanatory. I can click and clicking twice will do that. If I want to make this more precise, I can click once, type the distance or the dimension of one side of that, let's say 2 feet, comma, 4 feet, enter. And so you'll notice the dimensions down here, 2 foot by 4 foot is the size of this. And I can go to the tape measure tool, measure that, and then as I'm doing this, you'll notice in the bottom left that that dimension is updating. So 2 feet, 4 feet. Okay, so the tape measure tool is a useful way to do that. There's also the dimension tool. So I can dimension those two edges, then hit spacebar to go back to the arrow. Okay, so a couple ways to accurately dimension and model geometry. And the same thing is with this line. I can click and I can type 5 feet, enter, and I can go in and say 2 feet, enter. So this can be a precise way to say 12 feet to model a floor plan or create a geometry that way. So I've completed this, and when you complete that polyline, it creates a solid naturally, which if that's not what you want, you can select just that surface and hit delete, and now it's just a polyline. If you want to select the whole thing and delete it, you can double click it and hit delete. If this were a 3D geometry, single clicking it grabs the surface, double clicking it grabs the surface plus the edges, and triple clicking it grabs the whole thing. All right, and I'm hitting delete to delete these objects. You can also use the eraser tool to erase individual elements. All right, so these are all the different two-dimensional operations I can do. Again, if I use my arrow key on my keyboard, left, right, up, down, I can manipulate the orientation of each of these. So I can choose which plane I want to be drawing in. And you'll notice when SketchUp draws curves, or in this case circles, it's creating polylines. These are not actual curves. That has to do with the way the software is written. Other software like Rhino will create actual curves, but with SketchUp, these are, when you zoom in far enough, these are actually polylines because of the way the mathematics behind this is actually working. So there's other 2D commands. So arcs, there's a couple different ways to make an arc. Let's say I wanted to create a filleted edge or a fillet for this edge so that it has a rounded rectangle. There isn't an easy way to do that, but the workaround in SketchUp is to create a 2-point arc. Click on one edge, wait until this snaps purple and you know it's tangent, and then you can set the radius. Let's say we want this radius, let's just say 2 feet, enter. Not the direction we wanted. Try that again. Click out here. Maybe the size of that's too big. One foot, enter. And so that worked, and it created a filleted edge here. Some other tools that we can look at, this is the offset tool. So if we wanted to create an offset, let's say a wall thickness or creating a table or something, you can click on this, grab the outer edge and offset a certain distance. You can either click to finish the command, or I can type in 1 inch to be more precise, or whatever dimension, and I can push pull this. Now I've created a separate surface, so I can push pull that. All right, so all of these can be manipulated. The follow me tool, this is another useful one in architecture. Let's say I wanted to create a rectangular slab that is maybe S-shaped. So I can start with a rectangle. I'm going to use my arrows to manipulate the plane orientation. Create a rectangle like this. And let's say I want a wall that is snaking. There's also the freehand tool. This is a little not as controlled as I would like it to be, so I'm not going to use that, but just know that that's there as an option. So I'm going to create a polyline that will be the path for this follow me command. So follow me takes a surface. Well, that became 3-dimensional. Let's go back. And I hit the arrow key on my keyboard to lock it to this dimension. So let's say I want to lock this on the green axis. I can hit the left arrow and it locks that. And then spacebar to complete. Okay, so that's going to be my path. This is going to be my profile curve. This is similar to the sweep command in SketchUp or in Rhino or in other software, but I can use this follow me. It says click the profile that you want to extrude. So I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to use my mouse and have it follow my cursor and figure out the entire distance that I want it to extrude or to sweep. And so when it's done, it completes that and creates a polysurface, 3-dimensional polysurface. So some other things that we can do. Before I get into these, I wanted to talk about grouping and components. So if I want to manipulate something, let's say I want to treat this whole thing like an object. If I click on this and go to move, it's just going to move that surface. And this is a really cumbersome way to try to work in SketchUp. So the way SketchUp is designed, this is meant to be either grouped so that this is one thing and can be edited, or turned into a component, where a component is a geometry that can be repeated, and a change to one will change all of them. That's a component. A group is when you have just one solid thing that is unique, and you can copy it as many times as you like, but changing one will not affect the others. So I'll demonstrate that here. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to right click it and say make group. Now when I go to move it, it moves as one thing. If I hit spacebar, go to the arrow, you'll see that this is all now one thing. I can still manipulate surfaces, edges by double clicking on it, and now you'll see everything else grayed out, and I can manipulate individual edges. So for example, move, I can still play with this, but then if I hit spacebar, click out here, it's now out of that editing mode, and I can move this thing and manipulate it as an object, not just individual surfaces. Okay, so again, to get into this, to edit it, I double click, and now I'm in editing mode, and then I click out here to get out of it. Okay, so this is a group. If I were to duplicate this, and you can duplicate something by selecting it, going to move, hitting the control button on your keyboard, the plus arrow shows up, and if I click once, click again, hit spacebar to end it, and now this has duplicated it. If I were to just wanted to move this, let's say I select this, go to move, without hitting control, now I'm just moving the object. But if I hit control, now I duplicate it. All right, so I've now created a group that I've duplicated twice, and you'll notice if I double click on this, select that surface, P for push pull, and move that, hit spacebar, click out here. These are all different. It's not doing it for the same for these other two. All right, let's say I wanted to create duplicates where changing one changes the others. I can do the same thing. So let's say I create a rectangle. And again, I want to group this, or I actually want to make this whole thing a component, right? So that I can just select it all at once, and then changes I make to one, I want to make to all of them in that series. So I can triple click this, right? Single click grabs the face, double click the face plus edges, triple click grabs the whole geometry, everything connected to it. And then I can right click and say make component. Now you can give it a name, we'll say block. And with a component, changing one changes all. So if I hit M for move, control, before I click anywhere, hit control, duplicate this, so click again. I now have two of them. So if I double click on either of them, select that surface, you'll notice both surfaces are selected. So when I manipulate one, it manipulates both. Then hit spacebar to complete it. And you'll notice I can still move these independently, but changing one changes both. All right, if you want to create an array, let's say I want 10 of these and I don't want to have to duplicate it one by one, select the object, hit M for move, control, again, before I even click, I hit control, click once, figure out the distance you want to move them. Let's say 5 feet, enter. So I typed 5 feet, enter. And then before I'm done, I'm going to hit X, so times, and then however many I want to array in that direction. So I'm saying move 5 feet times however many. So I'm going to say 10, enter. So you'll see down here I hit times 10, and it moved this 5 feet times 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it moved it 10 times. This is the original. And since these are all components, I can double click any of these, select that, face, hit P for push pull, changing one now changes all of them. Spacebar, select the edge, M for move, and I can manipulate all of these at once. Spacebar, select, click out here. Okay, so components create many of the same thing, and changes to one make changes to all. Let's say I've done that and I want to make this one unique. I can select it, right click it, and say make unique. And now it's no longer controlled by the others. So selecting this, P for push pull, it's no longer affecting this one. All right, so we've covered creating 3D objects, groups, and components. We can also talk about scaling. So let's say we wanted to scale this geometry up. I can select it, click on the scale command, and this allows me to scale it either in a certain direction or uniformly, two-dimensionally, etc. So that's a useful tool. And then rotate. If I select the geometry, I can rotate it. And again, using my arrow keys on my keyboard, I can choose which axis on which to rotate the geometry. Spacebar. Okay. And so another one, so we've gone over tape measure and dimension. We can also cover text. So this is a text label. So notice it says block. So that's because we called this block. This doesn't have any information that it's pulling, but it has a way that we can label that. So if I select this object and we give this an instance name, we'll say so we've renamed it snake. I can then go into text, select it, and now that name snake shows up. So that can be useful if you're creating a diagram and you want to annotate various parts of a model. You can use the text label tool. There's also a three-dimensional text geometry. So you can select this and say block. Place that. So that can create three-dimensional text. All right. So next, I wanted to cover Boolean tools. So we've created some geometry here. Let's say I have this object, and let's say I want to make a subtraction out of this. I'm going to use this rectangle. I'm going to use the push-pull. Get spacebar, P for push-pull. Do that. And I'm going to make this a component as well. Triple click, everything's selected. Right click, make component, box. And what I want to do is subtract this from that. So I have a cavity in this, I have an opening in this. So up here, these are the Boolean add and subtract. So there's different ways that you can do this. Like let's say we wanted just the intersection, I could use that. In this case, I want to subtract this from that. So I can use this subtract. And down here, it's telling me select first solid. I'm going to select this, second. So that did the opposite of what I wanted. So what I want is select this and that. So the first object you select is the thing that you want to be subtracted, and the second object is the thing to be subtracted from. Okay, so there's also outer shell. So if I wanted to create a kind of a shell around two objects, I could do that, or join multiple geometries together. That's also possible. So let's try that. P for push pull, triple click, right click, make component. Say I wanted to join these two in union, select both. And so now these are one thing. And I bet if I even go inside, these are now merged. There are no dividing surfaces inside. All right, so those are some of the Boolean tools. There's also split and trim. And these are the different orientations. So you can go to a top view. It's not a true top view. It's not a projected view because right now we're still in perspective. So the other things we can do, if you go to camera and then parallel projection, now we're in a true top view, right? Going to top view. We can go to front view, right, and then if I middle mouse click and orbit, it's now in an isometric view because we went to camera, parallel projection. So instead of perspective, now everything is a parallel line drawing. There's no kind of receding into space. There are no vanishing points. Everything is a parallel line drawing. So if I want to go back into perspective, go to camera and perspective, and now we're back in perspective mode. So if you want to get a top view of your project, first go to parallel projection and then go to one of these top views, side views for elevation, or an isometric view. So we should go over the trays on the right. So entity info, when you click on an object, all of its info comes up. So remember we named that snake. That's here. Tags, these are like layers in virtually every other software. SketchUp calls them tags because they have to be different, but this is virtually layers. So this will tell you what layer that geometry is on, and the type, its volume, and any other information. You can lock it so that now it can't be moved or accidentally nudged. So, and then again, all of these are expandable. So if you have limited real estate on your screen, you can turn these on and off. So these are all the components. So all the components are here. So let's say I wanted to grab one of these components we already made. You can select it here and then add it to your scene. So that's pretty useful. Styles, this is the graphic style for your scene. So by default, this is one of the kind of simple styles here. You can change these depending on what you're looking for. Default styles, let's say we want kind of a hidden line view where it's just white. This is, I think, the ideal for most architectural 3D views. And you can edit these as well. So let's say you wanted a color for the geometry. The back color, so the back of these surfaces. Has that blue color. Won't go too deep into this, but you can also toggle these. These are different shaded modes. So let's say I want shadow. If I wanted textures, I could turn that on. We haven't added any textures to this, but that is an option. And then X-ray mode gives us kind of a shaded translucent wireframe. There's also wireframe, which can be useful to see inside of a geometry. turn off X-ray. And you can set the quality of the transparency here to faster or nicer. So there's a lot of things that you can do to edit these scenes to make them graphically what you're looking for. So that is styles, and you can, make them, save them, and then tags. So this is like layers. So with layers, you can select these, assign a layer. So let's create a new tag or layer. We'll say first floor. Let's say you're modeling a building and you have multiple geometries that should be on the first floor. I can select these and then under entity info, I can give this the tag first floor. And so now if I turn that layer or tag off, those are hidden. So I can go in and make as many tags as I need to. Say the footing, select these objects, and I can tag them with footing, and now they can be turned on and off, but this is now my default layer. So I'm currently working in that, or it's my active layer, so I can't turn this off. So if I were working in this one, I can now turn this one off. So just be aware of that. You can add folders to organize these layers or tags, but this is handy when you're working in a complex file and you want to organize the geometry. Scenes, we can create scenes just like any other 3D software, basically setting the camera to a view. Let's say we really like this view. I can click on the plus sign and it's going to add a scene, and I can tell it, do I want to save this style? I'm just going to say create scene. Then zoom out to here. I can create another scene. And so that way when you're working, you can always go back to that particular view. I can click on this or double click on it. It'll take me back to that particular scene. So if I want to render a particular view or create a screenshot of this view, I can always get back to it that way. And so you can remove scenes by clicking on it, selecting that minus, and so on. Instructor, so this will give you advice and tips and tricks on using the various tools. Materials, so this allows us to assign materials to the geometry we've been working on. So I can select this, double click on it. That's right, so we're in a hidden line view, so we're not actually seeing the color show up here, because everything is just white. So I'm going to go to styles, and we'll go to this architectural design style. So now we made that one unique. Let's see if I change this. And I'm going to go back to these. If I change that color, now you'll notice that it changed the color for all of those faces. So I can double click and assign colors. There's a whole set of materials. It's not just colors, so you can choose corrugated metal. And you can play with each of the materials. There's a lot of different options here. You can edit the material. You can upload your own bitmap image. So this will, if you want a specific texture of wood or some two-dimensional image that you downloaded from online, you can assign that here. So that can be done. And those materials will show up when you render this in other software plugins and things. And then this last part, shadows. So we can turn shadows on by clicking this show hide shadows. And now it's giving us a preview of what this view looks like with shadow. And I can change the lightness of the shadow and how bright the light is, kind of the spotlight hitting the geometry. And I can set various days and times. I can give this project an actual location up here, so give this an actual geolocation so that all of this is accurate. So SketchUp is useful for all the kind of tools that I just showed. If there's, for example, a staircase or something that you want to download, you can go to the extension, the 3D warehouse. So that's what we're looking for. So 3D warehouse, and you can download any of the models that the community has put online. So for example, if you like a particular bench, and there's products on here, and there's also models that are made by users. So this is kind of interesting. Typical wall section. So some useful things on here, but you can click on this and then download it into your model and say yes, and it'll drop it in. So this comes in as a group. I can double click on this, double click again, and then all of these objects are grouped. So you can see, the useful way that most people create complex models like this is they'll model something, group it, and then continue going. So everything is grouped to create a composite, more complex model. It's a great model, actually. Useful to see the bones of a building. Also, there's a whole list of extensions. So if you go to the extension warehouse, these are extensions that are basically plugins that people have made and uploaded so that you can download them and make your life a little bit easier with certain things. This is SketchUp's AI tool that allows you to create text to image. So you can take a view of your project and use this, and it takes that screenshot of the view and then creates a 2D AI image from that view. So it'll give you 3 options, and you can choose which one you like and add text to your project. One more thing to show, and this is useful for architects, product designers, the section tool. So the section plane is here, and you'll notice that it's trying to find an orientation. Again, I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to choose the orientation. So I want to cut a section through this project. I'm going to click on this, and you'll notice that it's slicing a section, saying name the section plane. We'll call this section 1. And now this section is an object that I can move. So I can select it, M for move, and I can select this and have this cut through the project to see what's happening inside. So spacebar, and there's different styles to display this. Okay, so toggling these will give me different views. So in this case, the cut itself can be toggled on and off, and the fill can be toggled on and off. So do I want all of that to come in as solid black or hollow? So this could be useful for creating a perspective section. If you have a 3D model, you want to cut a section through it, or just a traditional projected section drawing. And then once I'm done with this, I could either delete it or I could hide it. So hiding this, you can do it with display section plane, so I can toggle this on and off. Display section cuts, so I can bring that, hide the actual section. And we should also mention that you can select a geometry and hide it. You can right click it, say hide, and then to get that back you can go to View, Hidden Objects, and it'll give you kind of a hatched version of that geometry, which you can then now right click and say unhide, and now it's back in the scene. And then you can uncheck Hidden Objects. Alright, so that is it for the tutorial.